Hey everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Austin Farmer, Marketing Director for the Retail Coach. And today on this webinar, we're going to talk about brick and mortar retail and how it isn't dead, it's just evolving. And so we're going to have Aaron Farmer, Senior Vice President here at the Retail Coach, and Kelly Kofer, the President and CEO of the Retail Coach, to give us insights about what's happening with the retail landscape and really how you as a community and economic development corporation or a chamber of commerce can navigate this ever-changing retail landscape. So things from Amazon and e-commerce all the way to new smaller store formats and what that means for communities and how you can really stay ahead of those changes. So Aaron, Kelly, welcome. Really excited to jump into this. Anybody that's attending, if you look in the bottom right corner of your screen, there's a questions box. So we're going to save some time at the end, probably about 10 or 15 minutes for some questions and answers, but feel free to ask those as we go through the presentation. And as those pop up, we'll try to get to those as we go through some of these slides. So with that, Aaron, I'll kick it over to you to get us into the retail landscape and really what retail looks like right now.
Perfect. Thanks, Austin. We are, just like Austin said, we're excited about this webinar. It's really no surprise if you watch TV, if you listen to media, watch the media, all you hear about is retail and really the kind of the changes that are happening, how retail is evolving. So we get those questions. Kelly and I both do on a regular basis. So we thought this would be a great time to have a webinar kind of focus on that factor. So we'll go ahead and get started here. As Austin mentioned, if you have any questions, just feel free to ask us as we go through, and we'll leave some time at the end as well. But really what we're seeing right now in the retail industry is really four factors that are really impacting the retail industry. Number one is the economy and what's happening with the economy right now. Looking at the stock market, looking at some of these things, the economy seems to be doing pretty well in the U.S. A big one, and Austin hit on this, is the encroachment of e-commerce, whether it's Amazon or other e-commerce platforms really impacting brick and mortar retail. We're going to talk about that today as well. Trump's another big factor in this. A lot of times retailers, developers, they'll wait to see, if we're in an election year or a previous election year, to see what's going to happen from a presidential standpoint before they'll make some decisions on, do we locate stores now? What are we going to do? And then also one of the biggest, probably after e-commerce, is millennials, and millennials are having a big impact on retail and what's happening there. So we're going to talk a little bit about millennials to start with. Really just a statement here, but retail is undergoing many changes, challenges, disruptive technologies, crises, and opportunities right now. And that's evident. It doesn't matter if you're in a mall or you're at a shopping center. You can just start to see some of these changes happening. But I mentioned we're going to hit on millennials first. Millennials are having a big impact as it relates to retail. A lot of these fast casual restaurants are really focused in their marketing to millennials. You're seeing that a lot with the major department stores as well, putting a focus on millennials. But thought this was a real interesting kind of tidbit here. But Americans check their social media accounts 17 times a day. And for some of the people I know, I think that number might even be a little low. So a lot of these retailers are starting to take advantage of social media. We're going to talk about it further along in the presentation, but we're seeing where a lot of these social media platforms will actually have a buy button. So you can actually click on the buy button through social media and actually purchase an item. So thought that was interesting. But in 2015, social networks earned about $8.3 billion from advertising. Social media ad spending is projected to exceed $35 billion this year. And then interesting, but it makes sense with the millennials and the changing shape of retail. 91% of retail brands use 2 or more social media platforms. So we're starting to see these retail brands really interact more with the customer, again, with a focus on millennials, but even the older population is starting to use the social media as well. Each millennial on average is spending about $2,000 on retail online on retail each year. So you can understand why these big retail brands and even the smaller ones are putting a focus on online spending and online presence for retail.
Aaron, I'll interject here if I could just a bit, but just on the previous slide, as it pertains to bricks and mortar retail, there's a number of retailer concepts that are focusing on the millennials. I know that Whole Foods, their 365 concept, which carries, less choices, less brand choices, and is much more of a utilitarian, simple store, is directed toward the millennial shopper. The millennial does not necessarily command the same things that maybe an older demographic does. So retailers are absolutely paying attention to the millennial shopper. The cartoon here says a lot as it pertains to independent businesses and online shopping, is that really there is a lot of pressure put on the independent business today, as well as the national brands. We are seeing really a shift in how independent businesses conduct business, and it will continue to shift. It must in order for them to exist. From the standpoint of the millennial shopper or the online effect, no longer can independent businesses operate as a hobby. They just absolutely can't. They must have set hours, and we've worked in a number of communities in a number of downtown projects within communities, and one of the frustrations first and foremost is we cannot get our independent businesses to operate as a business, a for-profit businesses versus a hobby, and they don't have set hours. They open whenever they want to. This is not going to be a choice for them going forward. They're going to have to focus on their business as they have not in the past. They must be consumer focused. They've got to carry what the consumer is wanting. One of the things that we are seeing as far as downtown goes and how they're reacting to the online impact is they no longer can carry one category. They no longer can carry shoes. They no longer can carry just women's clothing. They have to offer multiple categories, because the key is once you get a customer in the front door, you've got to make the sale. So the more options they have, then the higher the likelihood that they will make a sale. And Aaron, you had mentioned about the use of social media. This is something that the independent business community is really lagging behind on, is how are they using social media? You mentioned 91% of the retail community is using at least 2 platforms. Independent businesses, I would venture to say it's a rarity if they are using social media, as well as websites. And that's another thing that independent businesses are really going to have to focus on in order to survive, with the 24-hour concepts and the online offerings, is they're going to have a website and start viewing themselves as marketing to the world instead of the people who live within their city boundaries. So, at the Retail Coach, we feel like you need to have a healthy balance of national brands and independent businesses. That should be your goal. So focusing on the independent business and how some of these things are really affecting them is going to be key for a retail strategy going forward.
Definitely. And really what we're seeing from an online retail sales growth, online retail sales have grown at a compound annual rate of about 10% from 2012 to this year. We've got on here by 2017, the web will account for about 10% of U.S. retail sales. Getting ready for this presentation, this research, we found some numbers that were up to 14 to 16% of U.S. retail sales are coming from the web now. So 14 to 16%. Let's remember this slide as we go forward. But just to kind of hit on what you were talking about, social media, Kelly, 37% of shoppers start on their mobile device. 72% of those are researching an item or checking prices on a smartphone before they're buying. I know I'm guilty of that. Only about 21%, though, at the end of the day, bought an item on their smartphone after they went to the physical location. So you are seeing a lot of this mobile technology, social media, that sort of thing, but how a majority of people are still inclined to make their purchases in store because they want it immediately, those sort of things. So remember that earlier slide we talked about 10 to 14, 16% of US retail sales are coming from the web. That still means, anywhere from 86 to 90% of all US retail sales will still occur in a brick and mortar site. So it's not all doom and gloom. It's not all the retail apocalypse talk that I've heard mentioned a couple of times. 86 to 90% of all retail sales are still taken in brick and mortar, are happening in brick and mortar sales. That's why Amazon, for example, is looking at opening, and they've already opened one or so physical stores. So it's not all doom and gloom, if that makes sense. But one of the big impacts and one of the big factors that we're seeing is as these online sales go up, we're starting to see the physical store sizes shrink. Staples was one of the first to do this, Office Depot, Office Max. They shrunk down the size of their stores, and then they would have a kiosk. Anything that you couldn't find in the store, you could actually purchase it, have it delivered to the store, or have it delivered straight to yourself. But we're starting to see this is a big trend right now. Kohl's is one. We're working on a Kohl's deal in the Austin, Texas area. And previously, if they would have done a 60,000 square foot store, they're now starting to do 30,000 square foot stores in certain markets. So we're seeing a lot of these retailers shrink the size of their stores, and then will allow you to order things, have it delivered to your store, have it delivered to your house as well.
Aaron, if I could make a comment on that, and just to the people attending the webinar, is if you had in mind that you wanted to recruit a Kohl's, a Best Buy, a Staples, and you didn't feel like your community was large enough to support their store, you may want to relook it, because as these stores downsize, obviously their investment is less. So they are now looking at markets that they maybe not have looked at previously, just due to market size, retail trade area size, because they make their decisions many times based off the ultimate investment it's going to take for them to open a new store. So if these retailers turned you down previously, you very well may want to revisit them, because there may be an opportunity that will present itself based on them downsizing their stores.
Absolutely. One thing we want to hit on real quick is restaurant growth. The National Restaurant Association is projecting that restaurant industry sales this year are going to reach about $798 billion. And that's an increase over 2016. But one thing I wanted to hit on is roughly 40% of retail growth is in the restaurant sector. So it's no surprise when I'm out traveling on the road, it's noticeable. You've got restaurants coming up out of the ground. So we're expecting restaurant growth to kind of lead the retail industry as far as new growth goes over the next few years. We're seeing a lot of the fast casual restaurants growth as well. I talked about millennials earlier, but the Zoe's Kitchens, the Panera Bread, the more fast casual type restaurants, we're expecting to continue to grow rapidly as well.
Hey guys.
Let me mention this. I'm sorry, sure. Austin, but one constant that we have seen during the recession, the 08-09 recession, is that restaurants continue to grow. And we've been talking this morning a little bit about, maybe culture shifts, maybe, social media and some things that basically were not around, 10 or 15 years ago. What we're seeing is the culture of the consumer in the United States is that we eat out when times are good and we eat out when times are bad. So thus, the restaurant growth has dominated the retail growth for years, and it's projected to do the same for the future. So, as you look at your community and you look at opportunities, at the top of the list, look at restaurants, because chances are you have opportunity in that sector.
Absolutely.
Hey guys, just a couple of questions here from the audience. Kelly, you talked about these smaller formats and these smaller markets. Is there a size market that somebody like Kohl's is looking at with a smaller concept, or are there commonalities in smaller markets that these retailers are looking at, and what can some of these smaller market communities do to help those retailers have interest in them?
Sure, sure. Well, my experience prior to the retail coach is working in the corporate real estate department of a national retailer. And every decision is made not off of community population, but off of retail trade area population. And that's basically how far are people driving in to shop in your community. That's what you have to find out. And, to answer your question specifically, what we're seeing is, 5 years ago, or less, Kohl's may be looking for a market of 70 to 80,000 people in the trade area. Today, that may be reduced to 50 to 60,000 in population of the retail trade area because, again, as I mentioned, their investment is less, therefore their demand of retail sales to support that investment will be less. So there is a point in there to where they would entertain an opportunity in your community based on that, whereas before they just absolutely could not.
Got it. Okay, let's keep moving to the next one. Aaron, can you jump in and tell us about restaurant spending and grocery spending
Yeah.
and the growth we're seeing there?
Well, this was just an interesting slide I wanted to show. For the first time within the last year or so, for the first time ever, we our restaurant spending, so the money we spend out to eat surpassed grocery spending. So I think that, Kelly, has a lot to do with that restaurant industry growing. Is we're still spending a lot of money, more, and I think it's a convenience factor. I think it has to do with millennials wanting to be able to go get their food quickly. I know with a small family like ours, it's just easier to go out to eat. So I think this chart here is just a great indication of why we're seeing that restaurant growth happening. It's because bottom line, we're spending more at restaurants than we are at grocery stores. So want to talk to you a little bit about store openings and closing. I mean, it seems like every week there's a couple of stores that are either opening stores or closing stores. So we've updated these since our last webinar. So we wanted to kind of get these in front of you and let you know who we're seeing expanding and who we're seeing close stores. So really planned store openings over the next 2 years. TJX, which includes TJ Maxx, Home Goods, Marshalls. I've got them in green here because they just announced the day before yesterday they're planning to open 260 stores. So they're going to be one of the fastest growing retailers this coming year. Ross is growing. A lot of those off-price retailers are growing. Nordstrom Rack is another great example. Nordstrom is not growing, but their Nordstrom Rack concept is. Grocers we're seeing grow as well. Kelly mentioned 365 by Whole Foods, and they're starting to open up some more of the 365 stores. The Amazon Whole Foods merger deals should be going through pretty quickly, and we expect that growth to continue. Sprouts is opening stores. The Fresh Market is opening stores. Walmart is only opening about 35 stores this year, and they're actually closing about 100. So Walmart's kind of slowed their growth. I did see where Walmart and Google are teaming up to go after Amazon. I saw that this morning when I was reading through an article. I thought that was interesting. Dollar Tree and Family Dollar rapidly expanding. You can see that there. Same thing with Dollar General, rapidly expanding. And then I mentioned it already, but that quick service or that fast casual restaurant chain, Chipotle, Panera Bread, Smash Burgers, and others like that, they're expanding rapidly as well. So over the next 2 years, this is what we're expecting to see. This is just a few of the retailers, but you can see off-price retailers, grocers, quick serve restaurants, and discount stores are helping to lead the way.
Hey, Aaron and Kelly, we get this question a lot, but where should communities or EDCs or chambers go to get in front of these retailers? Is that big national conferences, smaller events? Like where should they invest their time and energy to get in front of these retailers?
Yeah, sure. So Kelly, I'll take that question. We believe at the Retail Coach it's so important to get in front of actual retailers, get in front of the site selectors, get in front of the brokers. So really, probably the main one that we would recommend attending is the International Council of Shopping Centers conventions, and typically they have regional events, and then they also have the national event that's in Las Vegas in May every year. We'd recommend attending that. I am going to be going, and our team is going to be going to the Retail Live conference, one of the Retail Live conferences that's happening in Austin next Thursday. Retail Live is a smaller smaller event to ICSC. They're not related, but it's a similar type event. But Retail Live has a couple of these events throughout the year. I know they had one in Florida recently, one in Los Angeles. So really, I would take a look at ICSC conferences, and also Retail Live is another one to take a look at.
And I will say that I'm involved quite a bit with our state ICSC, which stands for International Council of Shopping Centers organization. It's the P3, where it's a public-private partnership. ICSC is going to great strides to work with municipalities on how they can provide educational opportunities to really educate these municipalities about retail and retail opportunities. Their website is www.icsc.org. That's icsc.org. If you're not involved, I would certainly encourage you to take a close look. It's very, very inexpensive. Aaron mentioned these conferences. The large one is in May of each year in Las Vegas. But start small, take a look and see if you have a state organization. If not, look regionally, because typically the retailers that are expanding in our area will be there at the state conference as well as the regional conference. And don't forget the developers as well. As you're networking with retailers, network with developers as well.
Right.
So a couple more store openings that I wanted to mention on here. We're going to talk a little bit more about the experiential retail and kind of the more trendy kind of fashion things going on right now. But H&M is one that's opening 60 stores in 2016, 2017. Bonobos is another one that's opening. Forever 21, you can see the others on there. So these are just some others that are going to be expanding over the next year or so. Now, from a grocery standpoint, we talked about groceries. We are seeing really grocery growth driven by the two German companies, Aldi and then also Lidl. So Aldi has 400 planned store openings. Lidl has about 100 planned store openings. We're also, I mentioned Walmart, their 2016, 2017 number is 59. The next 2 years, we're expecting 35 or so for them. Target is back again. They've started remodeling a lot of their existing stores. I've noticed that just driving through a couple of the Targets here in our region. And then Costco is opening stores as well, 24 new stores for Costco, which was a pretty strong number for Costco.
Aaron, let me interject one thing about Walmart. Obviously we're very familiar with the Walmart supercenters that are across the country and basically, every market, it seems like. But, they're expanding their neighborhood market concept. That's a 40 to 42,000 square foot grocery concept. Interestingly, we just did a deal with them in my hometown. It's a town of about 40,000 people. We have two super centers in our town that they came in and opened a neighborhood market, a 40,000 square foot grocery store, in addition to the super centers. Their logic is that the super centers are so busy that they're losing business, if that makes sense, because people like maybe my demographic doesn't want to go into, park out in the middle of the parking lot and walk in for bread and milk. We just will go to a competitor. So they're looking at offering these neighborhood market grocery stores as an alternative and in addition to the super centers for convenience shopping. So Keep that in mind. If you feel like that's a concept that would fit your community, just because you have a super center does not necessarily keep you from having a neighborhood market as well.
So Kelly, I don't know about you, but not just your demographic, but it seems like every time I go into a Walmart, there are only, a lot of times there's only two lines open. So because of that, I would go to the neighborhood market personally also.
Yeah, I think that's part of the logic as well.
So I want to talk to you real quick about some store closings that we're seeing. Staples, we're seeing a lot of their stores closed, downsizing their retail square footage, and some of the stores that are open. I mentioned they're doing a kiosk where you can walk in and purchase things on the kiosk and have it you can have it sent to you, and a lot of times the next day. We talked about Walmart already, closing stores. Macy's is closing quite a few stores, 40 stores or so that they're closing right now. They're expanding their off-price brand, and their overall plan is to reach about 30% of sales, of their sales to be online. Sears, that's no surprise. Sears and Kmart, we're seeing closed stores across the country. We've known that's been coming for several years. And then Nordstrom's doing the same thing, lackluster in-store sales. They're still opening a few. Like I said, they're focused on the Nordstrom Rack concept. And then the one that was announced, I guess it was last week, is the parent company for Applebee's and a lot of the IHOPs is Dine Equity. They announced they're closing about 135 stores. They're not going away, but they're just trying to they're going to try to reemerge. I think their brand has taken some hits in the past recent years. So they're going to try to close 130 stores, low performing stores, and kind of reemerge with a new process. Real quick, just two more slides. Retail growth for 2017 and 2018. We're expecting the fitness, the health, and the spa concepts to continue to grow. Same thing with the drugstores, Walgreens, CVS, Rite Aid, expecting that expansion to continue. Same thing with thrift stores. We're seeing a lot of the Goodwills, the Salvation Armies, and other types of thrift stores expand. Smaller format grocery stores are expanding as well, whether that's the discount, the ethnic, the organic, the upscale. We mentioned Aldi and Lidl and their expansion in the U.S. Fast food's going to continue to grow. Fast casual dining we've talked about that many times already. And then the trendy Cool Streets brands are expanding. We're going to talk about those as we move forward as well. Bookstores are going away. Video stores, if there's anybody left, they're almost all gone. Do-it-yourself home stores not expanding rapidly. Mid-priced apparel, your Macy's, those types, your Kohl's, they're contracting somewhat, shrinking the size of their stores. Same thing with the mid-sized grocery, mid-price grocery, and then office supplies. Just a lot of people buying office supplies online, I think leads to a lot of that. So just a few more trends we want to talk to you about. These are just some of the top 10 trends we found. One of the trend is from a retail perspective is the wearable technology. We're starting to see some of these new retail holidays pop up. Like Cyber Monday, for example, the Monday after Black Friday. We're starting to see more retail holidays like Prime Day. Amazon has Prime Day. We're seeing that happen a lot. Voice technology is another one, whether that's Alexa or some of the others. Alexa's the Amazon one, I believe, where you can actually just say, hey, just announce it in your house to buy something, and your Amazon account will buy it right then. We're starting to see virtual reality in the shopping experience as well. Video streaming is continuing to happen. Really, the Internet of Things is another. We're starting to see a lot of the mobile payments and alternative payments. Amazon opened a store in Seattle not too long ago where you actually something on your smartphone. They could track when you walked into the store and they automatically charged you through your smartphone. So I mentioned this one previously, but social network buy buttons is increasing as well. We're seeing a big trend in increased spending on pets as well. And then another trend is personalization. So being able to personalize items, whether that's tennis shoes or that's watches or anything else, those are some of the big trends we're seeing in the retail industry right now. In-store kiosk is another one. I'm sure you've seen these. The one on the top left is an in-store kiosk for Macy's. The one in the middle is one at Kohl's, and then Staples, I mentioned previously. Basically, this allows stores to shrink the size of their stores, but also gives you the ability to purchase items that they don't have in store. So a lot of them are working to have 1 day, 2 day, or sooner delivery, depending on where their warehouse is. So this will be something we continue to see. We're also starting to see in-store kiosk at restaurants. I was in a McDonald's recently that had in-store kiosk as well. So that's going to continue as we move forward also. Online ordering and reward systems is another big thing. One of my favorite restaurants is Whataburger, and they have a reward system. They have where I can pay online now, so that's going to continue. Starbucks has a reward system set up like that now as well. Again, I pay through my cell phone when I go into Starbucks. Macy's is starting to do the same thing with apps and reward systems as well. So that'll continue to be a trend as we move forward. Kelly, I'm going to let you take this slide. Just start off with this one if you don't mind, and just talk a little bit about experiential retail.
Yeah, and I sort of mentioned this a little bit earlier when I was talking about the independent businesses, of not carrying one category but carrying multiple categories. I mean, this is an example of a store that sells bicycle, watches, leather goods, and it, from the standpoint of complementary items that they carry, there's no rhyme or reason to it. But the interesting thing is it's very, very successful. So this is an upper end store, but the takeaway from this is, and this is a definite trend in retail, is creating a buyer experience. It's got to be something different. You've got to give the consumer a reason to walk into your front door. Presentation is one, but obviously the level of goods and services that you're carrying is another. All of that has to be wrapped around having somebody that's operating that store has the personality and drive to assist the customers. So Shinola is a brand that is super successful. They have a great equation. And again, I mentioned this early on. This is something that you need to start thinking about when you're talking to your independent businesses. Don't just open a shoe store. Think about, number one, complementary things to carry, but it does not have to be complementary. Find out what the consumers want and the consumers buy, and offer that to the independent businesses as merchandise that they need to carry.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think
we see the same thing in malls. Enclosed malls. I mean, and this is a trend that we're most definitely seeing. And Aaron mentioned a little bit earlier about store closings. Talked about Sears. J.C. Penney has reorganized a couple of times. They're really trying to find their way. You've got Macy's closing a number of stores. So I would challenge you. Take a look at the mall in your community and rate it. Is it an A mall, B mall, or C mall? A being super successful, high occupancy, incredible amount of foot traffic. B being something a little bit lesser, and C being one that's struggling. What we're seeing across the country is incredible pressure on mall properties. Are they malls in 2017, 2018? Are they retail malls in 2017, 2018? Start thinking about that, because if something happened to Sears, something happened to J.C. Penney, and Macy's was to go out in a number of locations, there are no major retailers to backfill that space. So keep your eye on your mall as you're thinking about your future retail plans, your future retail strategies, as well as your future retail concepts that interest you. This slide, in addition to the one that the previous ones about Shinola, is we talked about the 365 Whole Foods concept that's a little bit more targeted to millennials. And you can see here that it's a smaller concept, and they have within the grocery store, they have record stores, tattoo parlors. They carry certain apparel, millennial that targets a millennial. So, you know, again, Whole Foods is evolving. They're not just carrying one category. The goal is, once the consumer gets in the front door, is to sell them something. So Whole Foods sees that. The independent businesses need to see it as well. Urban Outfitters, pizza. They bought a pizza chain. So in the Urban Outfitters stores in areas, they have a pizza shop. So
hey, Kelly,
keep that in mind. Yes.
When I'm buying my skinny jeans at Urban Outfitters, I'm eating pizza at the same time. So you know, it's a weird.
So obviously not a complimentary use, but obviously it works.
Yeah, it's a weird connection, but it's working, and again, they're focused on that millennial. Now, before we move on to the next slide, I want to hit on something real quick because I forgot to mention it about grocery stores. Kelly, one of the big things we're seeing with grocery stores and even Walmart is they're doing the curbside pickup now and the store pickup. I know here in Texas, H-E-B grocery store just started doing the curbside pickup, and I think you pay like $4. And we're seeing that's a huge trend right now with especially groceries, is that curbside pickup. It works well if it's parents with kids or moms with kids. It's just convenient to be able to pick your items up at the, order them online and pick them up at the curb. But still, that point of sale is taking place in the brick and mortar. So I wanted to mention that before we move forward.
Hey guys, I think one thing's interesting too is we talk about the diverse different offerings retailers are starting to have and kind of the experiences. We've had a lot of success with cell phone analyses and looking at retail gap analysis. And can y'all just spend just a minute or less just talking about the importance of being able to show opportunity in different categories and show that people are coming into the community for other things, like to eat and to shop and to do other things as well?
Yeah, so we'll hit on that a little bit further down in the presentation too. But the main thing, retailers, if they're going to locate in your community, they're looking for actual data that shows where your customers are coming from. So instead of relying on computer models like a radial or a drive time, there's a new cell phone analysis that we use that shows us exactly where consumers are coming from. So we're going to talk about that a little bit further down in the presentation.
Great.
So just a few of those retail, that experiential retail we mentioned there, Warby Parker, Fred Perry, Marine Layer, Bonobos, Shinola was mentioned already. These are some of those experiential retail names we were talking about. So now that we've talked about retail trends and kind of what we're seeing in the industry, we want to talk a little bit about, as this retail industry evolves, what you can be doing as a community, whether you're an economic development corporation, a chamber, a city, what you can be doing to get in front of these retailers. So at the end of the day, retail must be a component of your comprehensive economic development strategy. Retail is quality of life. As you're looking to recruit manufacturing, industry, those sort of things, retail has to be a component of your community's economic development strategy. Even if I'm a large industry looking to open in your community, if I'm looking to move people there, I want to make sure there's quality of life. I want to make sure there's retail there. That's what people look for. We've talked about what's going on in the industry, and caution prevails. Despite an improving economy, these recession-wary retailers are still cautious. So you, as a community, you've got to get them up-to-date, analytical, data-driven information, because at the end of the day, they're looking for the sure thing. If they're going to locate in your community, you've got to be 100% sure they're going to be successful. A lot of these retailers, a lot of these restaurants can't afford to open an unsuccessful store. So it's up to you to get this information in front of them. So we're gonna hit on a few things here real quick as far as strategy goes, but retailers look very closely to store spacing. So if you're looking to recruit a retailer, you're looking to recruit a restaurant, make sure you're aware of where their closest locations are. Are you far enough away for them to consider a location? We talked about this a second ago, as far as the cell phone analysis goes, but this is probably the most important slide in our presentation. Know what your retail trade area is. Kelly mentioned when he was working for a retailer previously, they would look at trade areas. They wouldn't look at the city or the county population. They would want to know where exactly are people coming from to shop and eat in your community. So we're going to talk on this next slide about the cell phone analysis. It's scary to think about, but nowadays we're all being tracked as far as where do we shop, where do we eat, whether you're using a credit card, whether you're using a rewards card, or whether it's this cell phone analysis, you're being tracked, like it or not. And what this does is we're able to go in and we're able to take a specific shopping center. It could be a restaurant, it could be a larger shopping center, and we're able to tell over a year's period who visited or who shopped at that shopping center. Now, we don't capture every single person that shopped there based off of their cell phone, but we capture a large enough sample size that you can see on the screen here, the blue dots on the screen here. This is a community we worked in Florida. The blue dots here represent where those consumers, the actual household address is. So you can start to see for this community, you can start to see that trade area form as far as where their customers are coming from. Same thing on the heat map in the bottom left corner of the slide. The darker the red is, the higher the concentration of consumers. Yellow, not as much. Green, just a few consumers. So again, for this community, which happens to be in Texas, you can see that primary trade area. You can see where people are coming from. And since we've started using this information, it's been really eye-opening to retailers, restaurants, and developers to have access to this. And it's just factual data that's much more reliable than a computer model.
Hey, Aaron, I know we've worked in communities before where sometimes that trade area, because of the way the road system works or because of surrounding communities, almost seems unbelievable. And so if you look at some of these maps, it's like, wow, that there are people coming from a wide area just to shop in this community. How do you communicate that to a retailer, and how do you use that data to say, hey, look, this is actual data from where people are coming from? Did we lose
Did
you?
we lose Aaron?
I think we might have lost him. Kelly, would you mind?
Well, I will jump into that.
Okay.
Again, excuse me. I think the thing about the cell phone analysis is it truly paints the picture of where the consumers are coming from, and it does not. It is not tied to a geography. Historically, retailers will look, well, how many people live within a 3-mile or a 5-mile radius? And that is just an outdated model today. Smaller communities who have to work a little bit harder to get the retailer's attention, a radio would not work because people may be driving 20, 30, 40 miles or minutes to come shop because they have to. There's no other shopping alternatives. This cell phone analysis truly paints the picture of where the consumers are coming from without having any bearing on distance or geography. It's a true snapshot of where they're coming from.
Right, and we had a question from one of the attendees about, are cell data trade area reports replacing license plate studies? Are those both considered as reliable still?
License plate studies are reliable. I think this maybe paints a little truer picture. The problem with license plate studies, it's really hard to get the information tied to the license plate, the home address, just for obvious disclosure reasons. Many states do not offer that information. Some do, but this is information that in a technology that's readily available to us for all 50 states.
Great. Yeah, and this is Aaron. I'm back here. What I've noticed too, Kelly, with the cell phone analysis and why I like it better than the license plate analysis is we're able to track people that shop there multiple times. So the cell phone analysis, if somebody shopped there 10 times or 5 times, we're able to track it that way. And visually being able to show that on a map is a pretty neat process.
Yeah, and again, I mentioned smaller communities, more rural communities. don't fit the typical model a retailer has, because again, consumers are accustomed to driving further distances to shop. It doesn't fit those models of a more urban environment. So offering this level of data through this technology really paints the picture for the retailer that this is a broad area that this small community is serving, and goes a long way for gaining their confidence that it's a market that they need to really take a good look at.
Got it. One more question, and then we'll address some of these other questions at the end. But how do communities use cell phone analysis to move the needle with retailers? The person asking says, I'm assuming that they all have in-house or contracted experts and already know your community from a data perspective. Is it true that retailers necessarily already know communities, or is this new valuable data for them as well? If you can paint this picture for them.
Well, I'll answer that, Aaron. We've worked with specific retailers. I mean, we are basically, the Retail Coach is a retail recruitment firm. That's what we do for our clients. And there has been numbers of examples in the past 2 years that we've been using this technology. It's so new that has really opened the eyes to a lot of retailers of, wow, our traditional models of a drive time, how many people can reach a site or a community within a certain drive time, or the radial methodology, are just absolutely not workable in all situations. So absolutely, they're starting to embrace it.
Great.
So real quick, just want to hit on the importance of demographics. We talked about the trade area, the cell phone analysis, but make sure you have up-to-date demographics. We deal with a lot of communities that are still operating off of 2010 census data, and that's what they have on their websites and those sort of things. So as you're going out trying to recruit retailers, make sure you have the most up-to-date 2017 demographic data. If you have questions on it, feel free to reach out to us. We can point you in the right direction, but make sure you have as up-to-date demographics as possible. On top of demographics, make sure you know what your psychographics are of the community. For those of you that don't know that term psychographics, the best way I've heard it described is demographics on steroids. So we all know what demographics are: income, those sort of things. Psychographics takes it to the next level. It tells you not only the demographics of your consumer, but it tells you what they buy, where do they shop, what are their lifestyle behaviors, do they buy certain brands versus others. So this is particularly important to national retailers, but we're also seeing a lot of local businesses really picking up on this psychographic trend and starting to use that to make sure they carry the right items for their customers. A couple more slides we want to hit on, and then we'll wrap this up for some questions. But on top of the trade area, probably our next most important slide is the gap analysis or the leakage analysis. Make sure you have an up-to-date leakage analysis. If you're a community and you're going out trying to recruit a grocery store, the grocery store is going to want to know, what is the potential there? How much money is leaving your community and being spent at other grocery stores or outside of the community? So make sure you have a gap analysis, or I refer to it as a leakage analysis. This will just tell you how much money is leaving the community, and it gives you, again, factual information or factual numbers to take to a potential retailer or developer to get them to consider developing in your community.
Aaron, I don't know if you have specific examples of this, but I remember a few years ago we worked in a community in California, and it kind of just in the community, everybody knew, hey, we leave to go to the surrounding communities to get these 5 things, right? Women's clothing, sporting goods, but no one could ever really quantify that. And it's really powerful to be able to go in and calculate those numbers and say, wow, we're spending $5 million in surrounding communities on certain goods. And have you seen that help with retailers or kind of peak attention in a community where there may not have been some before, because they could say, hey, here's a real number of how much we're spending in other communities. Your store could be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. By itself, the gap analysis isn't going to sell the community to a retailer, but if you can pair this up with that trade area and with the population of that trade area, and be able to show these retailers that they can come in and they can make money, and they can be successful in your community, they'll do that. So this is a really powerful tool to have in your toolbox.
Great.
Want to just emphasize real quick the importance of knowing your workforce and your daytime population. Depending on who the retailer is, a lot of times, specifically restaurants, are concerned with how large is your workforce or your daytime population. Make sure you've got up-to-date information on that. We have the ability to run workforce and daytime population reports, but you can also reach out to your employers and find out how many employees they have. That's powerful information to have. Again, particularly important for restaurants. Last couple slides here we want to hit on. Want to emphasize the fact of knowing available sites and properties in your community. The first question we get when we're out there recruiting for our clients is, okay, we like the community, but what sites are available? So want to just emphasize the fact that you have a database of sites ready to go. If you're looking to recruit a Starbucks and they're looking for 0.75 to an acre location for a standalone with a drive-through, make sure hey, here are the 5 sites that fit what you're looking for. So again, just want to emphasize that you are ready to go. If you're attending one of these Retail Live conferences or maybe ICSE conferences, that you have sites ready for that retailer or that developer the same day or at least the next day, ready to go. This is something that we've started focusing on probably, Kelly, in the last 5 years or so.
Yes.
And what we've found is providing sites to these site selectors, to these developers, at the end of the day, it just speeds up the retail recruitment process.
Austin, if I could just add to the answer of your previous question about how to move the deal forward or move the relationship with the retailer forward, is obviously the cell phone analysis and the retail trade area determination is absolutely key. It's ultimately the foundation of what you work with, because it determines ultimately how large your trade area is and retailers fit within that certain trade area. What we have found, and really to push the deal forward the quickest, since we're the recruitment arm of our clients, is it is imperative that we know every available site in your market. So we can marry that site to a Starbucks, a Kohl's, as we mentioned a little bit earlier, or it could be a greenfield site that we're looking at that could be your next intersection to develop with a grocery anchored shopping center. So, we move forward through the recruitment process, and this identification of available sites is absolutely key to that success.
And just to build off that quickly, Kelly, that plays into a question we had earlier about ICSE events and getting in front of retailers. The question was, should we try to schedule meetings beforehand or just talk to them when we get there? And I think definitely when you can schedule meetings beforehand, and then it sounds like your recommendation would be also come into those meetings or those conferences with sites that you can show them to say, you would be perfect, and here's a site that's ready to go, give them everything they need.
Right. Absolutely. Are they going to be aware of your community? As the attendee had questioned, yes, they are, but they are most likely not going to be familiar with the sites in your community. So we put a great deal of importance on when we meet with a retailer, we're not just saying, hey, are you interested in this community? We're giving them various choices through these real estate sites for them to be able to take action. So again, very, very important. If you have 5 minutes or 10 minutes with a retailer or developer at one of these conferences, for you to fully understand the opportunities in your community as well as the available sites.
Real quick, we're just going to pass through this slide, but make sure you conduct a land use analysis. Just go through your existing, go through your community, drive your major corridors, identify those sites that are not serving their highest and best use, and have those in a database, again, like Kelly said, to get in front of a retailer, get in front of a restaurant at these meetings. You know, you really need to market your vision for retail revitalization. Make sure you've got up-to-date information. We talked about that already, but make sure you've got marketing materials that stand out, that really show what you're going for there. Really, what's gonna differentiate your community from another retailer at one of these conferences that's passing out a flyer. Make sure you're marketing your vision for retail revitalization, retail development, and again, have this information readily available.
Yeah, and keep in mind, more is not always better. Understand what retailers and developers are looking for and provide that information. That moves the deal forward quicker than you trying to give them too much information that they have to search through to find those 10 things that really, really are important to them.
Make sure you have a retail website with those site selections, those site locations on it, an interactive mapping application. Make sure it's easy to find. If I'm a retailer, I'm a site selector, I don't want to have to go to the city's website, the chamber's website, the EDC website, just to find all the information. I want one place to go. So that's one of the things we do for our clients is we create a retail dashboard. So you have one place to go if you're a retailer or a restaurant. And that just helps speed up the recruitment process. Can't stress this enough, but recruit retailers and developers that fit your community. If you're a town of 2,000, you're not on a major interstate, chances are Bass Pro Shops, Cabela's are not fits for you. Make sure you're targeting and going after retailers that fit your community. And like Kelly mentioned earlier, some of these retailers are shrinking the size of their stores. So maybe a retailer wasn't a fit previously. Now they possibly could be a fit. So target retailers that fit, really just very, very important. Make sure they fit your community. We've talked about this already, so we're just going to kind of skip through this one pretty quickly as well. But can't emphasize enough how important it is to be at ICSC and to actually have a strategy put together. You can't just go to these ICSC or these other events and expect to have success walking up to a retailer. Setting up meetings ahead of time are a necessity. Really customizing your information. If you're meeting with Target and you want to hand over a marketing flyer for Target, make sure it's got Target's logo on it. Show these retailers that you've taken the initiative, you've done this, you've focused it for them. That'll show the retailers you want them in the community. So International Council of Shopping Centers, make sure you have a strategy and a plan going into it.
And let me say this too. One of the things that we do with our clients at these shopping center conventions is we either set meetings for them with retailers, and many times, if not most times, we attend the meetings with them. We encourage you. If we're able to meet with Kohl's or whoever it may be, we want you or a representative of your community at that meeting. Again, as Aaron just mentioned, it shows them involvement and interest on your part, on the municipality's part, to have them in the community. It's a separator differentiator. It's key, and we encourage it.
Again, kind of tying into ICSC, just be prepared, kind of map your agenda. You need to have realistic goals and expectations, especially if you're going to have some of your council members out there, board members. Make sure you set realistic goals. I mean, you're not going out there to make a deal. It's a networking event is what it is. And it's really all about follow up. You want to sell your community first, and then you want to sell the sites you have. That's key. Taking all of your information on an iPad is something we recommend, just because nowadays these retailers, these site owners, they don't want to have to take home a huge packet of information. Kelly mentioned to keep it simple. So an iPad allows you just immediately to email the information to them. And then lastly, we'll just talk about real quick franchises. National franchises are growing rapidly. They're attracting more entrepreneurs than ever. Just emphasize that you're not only going after the corporate locations. One of the successes we're having recently is if we're working in the community, we'll look in the region and we'll find out who are the franchisees, who are the owners of some of these franchise-based businesses, and we'll go out and recruit them. So make sure your recruitment effort is a local recruitment effort. It's a regional recruitment effort, but it's also a national recruitment effort, and you're going after all types of retailers and restaurants. Another thing to take a look at is conceptual site plans, incentive packages if necessary. We're not huge fans of incentives at the Retail Coach, but we know they're necessary in certain situations. And then at the end of the day, you absolutely have to make sure you have a proactive, business-friendly city. These retailers want to go to places where they're wanted, and they want to go to places where they're not having to cut through a lot of red tape just to get into the community. So keep that in mind as you move forward. Take a long-term approach. That is key. I mentioned this already, but follow up. Typical retail recruitment process, if you're lucky, is anywhere from 12 to 36 months from initial reaching out to a retailer, getting them interested, then building a site if they need to build a site or if they're going into an existing location. So take a long-term approach. A lot of times we'll see communities, they'll focus on retail for a year and then they'll forget about retail and they'll focus on other things. So just make sure you look at this as a process and not a one-time event, and you'll start to see some success in your community.
So I think this is a great time to jump into the questions. Aaron, Kelly, anything else that we didn't talk about or anything that you want to make sure that we make a point of before we get into Q&A?
Well, one thing that I will underscore, and I mentioned it earlier, is don't overlook your downtowns. I'm preparing a webinar now, and we'll be announcing it here in the very, very near future, is on independent business growth and why it's important to the community, and how do you find the independent businesses. Our approach to that is a little bit unique. It takes a lot of on-the-ground work, but we found that it's successful. And identifying entrepreneurs and independent businesses that are successful, maybe in surrounding communities that could duplicate in your community. You need to pay attention to that. And we're going, as we move forward, I'm a strong believer in that independent business growth is going to be really key to a community. As I mentioned earlier, there needs to be a really good, strong, healthy balance between the national brands as well as the independent businesses.
Kelly, that you kind of answered it in a way already, but great question we got was how should communities working to redevelop small urban downtowns that are currently lacking in retail adjust their approach to recruiting retail? And it sounds like there's a mix there of trying to find those entrepreneurs and independent business owners that are viable for that kind of environment.
Absolutely. Our approach to retail recruitment for the national brands is really what we touched on today. Our work with independents is built around education as well. We need to educate them on not just the market. We need to educate them on the opportunities and quantify the opportunities, like Aaron mentioned, through the gap analysis. And then we need to marry them to a site where we think they could be successful. But it's all about educating them every step of the process and making sure that they're ready to compete with the online Amazon platforms as well as the national brands. I mean, it's more than just finding a storefront to lease. We've got to remove as much risk as possible. They're much less sophisticated than the national brands. Therefore, we feel like our responsibility is greater to make sure they make a good business decision.
Kelly, another question that plays right into that is, would you suggest offering an experiential retail workshop for existing retailers? And if so, do you have suggestions on who might provide such a workshop? I know you've done some of those before, and can you talk a little bit about whether that would be a good investment or not?
Right, right. Yes. I have a presentation I'm going to be giving in upstate New York, where we're focusing on the downtown district in a really cool community. A lot of national retailers, but it's an old industrial town with a really, a lot of character in the downtown, but they just have not been successful with downtown merchants. And that is part of it. Just everything that I mentioned about the experience, about multiple categories, and those type things that are what we're going to be doing in this workshop.
Great. One of the questions that we keep getting is about some of the license, or not license plate analysis, the cell phone analysis, and how much that cost, and some questions about those. With specific questions, we need to ask a few other questions to give you the best possible answer to that. So Aaron, Kelly, I know y'all will be following up after with anybody that has questions. Is there anything you want to speak into that, or is that something that would be better if we just talked offline and y'all got to people after?
Yeah, I mean, Aaron's contacts information there. I mean, we'd love to visit with you about that and how we would use it.
Great. Aaron, did you want to jump in?
No, I was going to say the same thing. Just feel free to reach out to us, and we'll help any way we can.
Great. So another question we got was with high restaurant growth, it seems like there's a lot of stuff going on with workforce issues and higher wages and automation. Do any of those factors affect what a community or an EDC would do to communicate with a retailer or get them interested in the community? How do they factor that in? Is that something that the community should worry about or try to counteract? What would y'all recommend there?
I think it's community by community. If you've got a workforce issue and you know that that's going to ultimately be an issue, you may want to have that discussion with them. I know for a fact in the hometown that I live in is that there was a period of time where the workforce was so small that they were having to bring some people in and bus, sort of get a van and bring them into work from surrounding communities. I mean, that was not something that sustained itself over a period of time, but, workforce is obviously important to them, but I have found in my experience and really in the retail real estate business since 1985 is if there is an opportunity for a retailer or a restaurant to make money in your community, they're going to do whatever it takes to make that work.
Great. Another downtown question, Kelly, I'll direct to you. How does a smaller urban traditional downtown with a current good mix of national and local retailers, several restaurants, services, on the ground floors and offices above the second floor, how do you feel about ground floor, no office restrictions on main streets to keep the lively and active nature, given the transformation of brick and mortar retail?
I think it's important. We see that oftentimes, many times in county seat markets where, you have service businesses, lawyers, whoever it may be, locate in the primary, storefronts on Main Street, say. So, if that's what the community desires, I see benefit in that. I mean, if the demand is there for a retail type store. So I think that's important. I've got many examples where the community just didn't go to that extreme, and they're super limited from a retail perspective because of it.
Great. I think that's a logical stopping point. Aaron and Kelly, thank you so much for being on. For everyone that attended, we're going to be sending not only the slides from this presentation, but a recording as well. So you can go back through that or send that to anyone on your team that you want to see it. Please feel free to reach out directly to Aaron or Kelly. Aaron's contact information is there. And there were a couple of people that asked questions about some of the mobile data and cell phone analysis. We'll follow up directly with you and make sure you have what you need. Aaron, Kelly, anything else before we sign off?
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for joining us. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, as Kelly said, this is just one in a series of webinars we're doing. So, please join us next time, and thanks again for joining us.
Yeah, and I would say this as well, just to add to what Aaron said. If there's something important to you and important to your community, let us know. I mean, we can build an educational webinar around that, because more than likely, if it's an issue to you, it's an issue to the other attendees today, as well as an audience out that would benefit from it.
Great. Well, thanks for your time, guys, and thank you so much for everyone that attended. If you have feedback for us, let us know if there's something you want to hear you didn't, or if you felt like there's something that we could do to make these better next time. Please let us know. Thanks a lot. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.